What if I told you that right now, as you're watching this video, humanity is living through the most significant moment in our species' history, and we don't even know it? What if I told you that in August 2025, world leaders received classified briefings that fundamentally changed everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe? And what if I told you that the object responsible for this paradigm shift has been hiding in plain sight, disguised as just another chunk of space rock drifting through our solar system? Welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, and today we're diving deep into what may be the most explosive story never told. The true nature of interstellar object 3, I/Atlas, and the unprecedented global conspiracy to keep its secrets buried. By the end of this video, you'll understand why astronomers worldwide have been sworn to secrecy, why defense budgets have quietly expanded by billions, and why the most advanced telescopes on Earth have been mysteriously redirected from their original missions. But I need to warn you, once you see the evidence we're about to present, you can't unsee it. Once you understand what's really happening above our heads, the world will never look the same again. So buckle up, turn off your notifications, and prepare to question everything you think you know about humanity's first contact with an intelligence beyond our world. Part 1. The Discovery. March 15th, 2025, 0347 UTC. Mauna Kea Observatory, Hawaii. Dr. Sarah Chen had been monitoring the Atlas III survey telescope for over 6 months when the alert appeared on her screen. After years of cataloguing asteroids and comets, she'd grown accustomed to the routine ping of new object detections. But this one was different. The preliminary trajectory data made her pause, then recheck her calculations, then call her supervisor at 4 a.m. Hawaiian time. "Jim, you need to see this," she whispered into her phone, staring at the luminous dot on her monitor that would soon turn the scientific world upside down. "We've got something coming in fast from interstellar space, and it's not behaving like anything we've seen before." What Dr. Chen had discovered was initially catalogued as 3I/Atlas, the third confirmed interstellar visitor to our solar system, following the enigmatic Oumuamua in 2017 and Comet 2 I/Borisov in 2019. But while those previous visitors had raised eyebrows and sparked debates, 3I/Atlas was about to shatter our understanding of what's possible in the cosmos. The object was approaching from the constellation Lyra at an astounding 87 kilometers per second relative to the Sun, faster than any natural comet should be traveling. Its hyperbolic orbit screamed interstellar origin, but something about its trajectory felt deliberate. Dr. Chen's initial calculations were run through the standard asteroid detection protocols. The data was automatically cross-referenced with the Minor Planet Center's database, checked against known orbital patterns, and flagged for spectroscopic analysis. But even these routine procedures began revealing anomalies that would haunt her for months to come. The object's brightness variation wasn't following the expected pattern for a tumbling asteroid. Instead of the chaotic light curve typical of irregular space rocks, 3I/Atlas was exhibiting what Dr. Chen later described as rhythmic pulsations, consistent with structured surface features rotating in a controlled manner. Within hours, observatories worldwide were training their instruments on this mysterious visitor: the European Southern Observatory's Very Large Telescope in Chile, the Subaru Telescope in Japan, NASA's Hubble Space Telescope. Even the recently deployed James Webb Space Telescope was quietly redirected to capture high-resolution images of the approaching object. Dr. Maria Santos at the Canary Islands Observatory was among the first international astronomers to confirm Dr. Chen's observations. "When I saw the data coming through our tracking system, I thought there had been an equipment malfunction," she later wrote in her private research notes. The acceleration profile was completely inconsistent with any known gravitational influences or natural propulsion mechanisms. But here's where the story gets interesting, and where the first red flags began appearing. The initial spectroscopic analysis, conducted by a team at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, revealed something that made seasoned astronomers question their own instruments. The light signature bouncing off 3 I/Atlas didn't match any known asteroid or comet composition. It wasn't reflecting sunlight the way ice and rock should. Instead, it was exhibiting what Dr. Michael Standish, the lead researcher, described in his private notes as anomalous optical properties consistent with manufactured materials. The spectral lines were all wrong. Where they expected to see signatures of common space materials, iron, nickel, silicates, water ice, they found absorption patterns that suggested synthetic compounds, materials that shouldn't exist in nature. Dr. Standish's team ran the analysis 17 times, recalibrated their instruments, and even borrowed data from 3 other observatories to confirm their findings. The results remained consistent. 3 I/Atlas was composed of materials that appeared to be artificially created. We're looking at metallurgy that doesn't match any known stellar formation process, Dr. Standish wrote in a memo that would later be classified. The isotope ratios are completely inconsistent with natural cosmic evolution. This object shows signs of deliberate construction using techniques we don't understand. Manufactured materials. Let that sink in. But here's what's even more disturbing. Within 48 hours of this discovery, Dr. Standish's research notes were classified under the rarely invoked National Defense Authorization Act. His team was issued non-disclosure agreements, and the preliminary findings that should have been published in Nature or Science magazine were instead buried in a classified Defense Intelligence Agency report. The process was swift and comprehensive. Federal agents arrived at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center under the cover of routine security assessment. Within hours, all data related to 3 I/Atlas had been transferred to secure servers. Research team members were individually interviewed and required to sign documents that legally prevented them from discussing their work with anyone lacking appropriate security clearance. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a junior researcher on Standish's team, later described the experience. They didn't just take our data. They took our computers, our backup drives, even our handwritten notes. Then they sat us down and explained that discussing this research outside of authorized channels would be considered a federal crime. The public story. New interstellar comet detected. Scientists studying its composition and trajectory. Nothing unusual. The private reality? Government agencies were quietly assembling the most comprehensive surveillance operation in astronomical history. But why the secrecy? What had these scientists discovered that warranted immediate government intervention? The answer lies in what happened next, and in the data that, thanks to a few brave whistleblowers, we're about to reveal to you today. Part 2. The First Anomalies. March 22nd, 2025. 1 week after initial detection. By the time 3 I/Atlas had crossed the orbital distance of Jupiter, it had already begun demonstrating behaviors that defied conventional physics, and the scientific community was starting to panic. The first anomaly was acceleration. Every natural object in space follows predictable paths governed by gravity and momentum. Comets might outgas material as they approach the Sun, creating slight course corrections, but these changes are gradual and explainable. 3 I/Atlas was doing something entirely different. Dr. Elena Vasquez at the European Space Agency's tracking station in Madrid was the first to notice it. The object is accelerating without any visible mechanism, she reported in an encrypted communication to ESA headquarters. No outgassing signature, no debris trail, No conventional explanation for the velocity changes we're observing. Traditional comets accelerate due to the sublimation of ice as they approach the Sun. This process creates a visible coma and tail, and the expelled material provides a reaction force that can slightly alter the object's trajectory. But 3I/Atlas showed no signs of outgassing, no visible coma, no debris trail, yet it was accelerating at rates that suggested active propulsion. The acceleration wasn't random, it was precise, controlled, as if something was actively piloting the object through space. Dr. Vasquez ran detailed calculations on the object's trajectory, mapping every gravitational influence in the solar system that could account for the observed changes. Jupiter's massive gravity well, solar radiation pressure, even the minute gravitational effects of Mars and Venus, nothing added up. We're seeing acceleration that requires approximately 10 to the 15th power joules of energy, she noted in her classified report. That's equivalent to the energy output of a small nuclear reactor operating for several hours. And we can detect no energy source capable of producing this output. But that was just the beginning. On March 25th, the James Webb Space Telescope captured infrared images that sent shockwaves through NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. Instead of the irregular, potato-shaped profile typical of asteroids, 3I/Atlas exhibited what internal memos described as geometric regularity, suggesting artificial construction. The high-resolution infrared imaging revealed details that challenged everything astronomers thought they knew about interstellar objects. The surface wasn't the chaotic, crater-pocked terrain of a natural space rock, but rather showed signs of systematic structural organization. Dr. Robert Kim, analyzing the Webb telescope data at Goddard, identified what appeared to be geometric patterns covering roughly 40% of the object's surface. We're seeing rectangular formations, parallel lines, and what look like deliberate surface modifications, he reported. This isn't the random impact, cratering you'd expect from billions of years in interstellar space. The object appeared to be roughly cylindrical, approximately 800 meters in length and 200 meters in diameter. Its surface wasn't the chaotic, crater-pocked terrain of a natural space rock, but rather showed signs of systematic structural organization. There were patterns, symmetries, features that looked disturbingly like design. Even more intriguing were what appeared to be surface features that seemed to change between observation periods. Areas that appeared smooth in one image showed structured patterns when observed hours later. It was as if the object was actively modifying its surface configuration. Then came the light emissions. Natural objects in space are essentially passive reflectors. They bounce back sunlight, sometimes with slight variations due to surface composition or rotation. They don't generate their own illumination. 3I/Atlas was glowing. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, operating the radio telescope array at the Very Large Array in New Mexico, detected electromagnetic emissions coming from the object that had no natural explanation. We're seeing structured energy output across multiple wavelengths, she reported in a classified briefing to the National Science Foundation. This isn't reflected solar radiation. This is active energy generation. The electromagnetic signature was unlike anything in the astronomical databases. The object was emitting energy across the entire electromagnetic spectrum: radio waves, microwaves, infrared, visible light, ultraviolet, and even traces of X-ray radiation. But the emissions weren't random stellar noise or thermal radiation. The frequency patterns show mathematical relationships, Dr. Walsh noted in her analysis. We're seeing harmonic progressions, Fibonacci sequences, and prime number patterns embedded in the signal structure. This is encoded information. The frequency patterns were complex, repetitive, and showed signs of information encoding. In other words, 3I/Atlas appeared to be transmitting data. But transmitting to whom? And about what? Dr. Walsh's team attempted to decode the signals using every cryptographic technique in their arsenal: mathematical pattern analysis, linguistic structure algorithms, even techniques developed for decoding whale songs and dolphin communications. The signals remained tantalizingly structured, but incomprehensible. It's like listening to a conversation in a language that uses mathematical concepts we recognize, but arranged in ways that suggest intelligence far beyond our current understanding, Dr. Walsh explained to her classified oversight committee. On March 28th, the situation escalated dramatically when ground-based telescopes observed something that made even the most skeptical scientists question their assumptions. 3I/Atlas had changed course, not gradually, as a comet might due to outgassing, not randomly, as an asteroid might due to collision debris, but deliberately, with surgical precision, the object adjusted its trajectory by 0.3 degrees, just enough to alter its closest approach to Earth from 50 million kilometers to 35 million kilometers. It was coming closer, on purpose. Dr. Robert Kim at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory ran the calculations 17 times before accepting the impossible conclusion. "There's no natural force that could account for this maneuver," he wrote in a memo that was immediately classified. "We're dealing with controlled navigation." The trajectory change wasn't just significant, it was impossible according to conventional physics. The object had altered its course without ejecting any detectable reaction mass, without visible propulsion exhaust, without any mechanism that should have been capable of providing the necessary force. But the most disturbing aspect of the maneuver was its precision. The course correction was calculated to bring 3I/Atlas to within optimal observation distance of Earth, while avoiding any gravitational perturbation that might affect the planet's orbit or pose a collision risk. It's as if the object calculated the exact trajectory needed to study Earth without causing alarm, Dr. Kim noted. The precision suggests not just intelligence, but intelligence that understands and respects planetary dynamics. Additional analysis revealed that the new trajectory would also provide optimal observation angles for Mars, Venus, and several major asteroids. 3I/Atlas wasn't just adjusting its course to observe Earth, it was positioning itself for comprehensive surveillance of the inner solar system. By the end of March 2025, a disturbing picture was emerging among the handful of scientists with security clearance high enough to access the complete data set. 3I/Atlas wasn't just an unusual interstellar visitor, it was displaying intelligence, active propulsion, geometric construction, electromagnetic communications, deliberate navigation. The implications were staggering and terrifying. Because if 3I/Atlas was artificially constructed, if it was under intelligent control, then humanity had just encountered something that would fundamentally challenge our understanding of our place in the universe. Dr. Amanda Foster, a senior analyst at the Space Surveillance Network, summarized the situation in a classified report that would define the government's response. Based on observable behaviors, energy signatures, structural analysis, and trajectory modifications, we must conclude that 3I/Atlas represents technology created by an intelligence significantly more advanced than current human capabilities. The object appears to be conducting systematic reconnaissance of our solar system. But instead of celebrating this momentous discovery, instead of preparing humanity for the most significant paradigm shift in our species' history, world governments made a different choice. They decided to hide it. Part 3. Government Awareness. April 3rd, 2025. National Security Council Emergency Session. White House Situation Room. The classified briefing began at 6 a.m. sharp. Present were the President, the National Security Advisor, the Secretary of Defense, the Director of NASA, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the heads of the CIA, NSA, and newly formed Space Force. The presentation lasted 47 minutes. By the time it was over, the most powerful people in America sat in stunned silence. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, NASA's Deputy Administrator for Science, had delivered the briefing with the clinical precision of a surgeon announcing terminal cancer. Charts and graphs displaying impossible physics. Photographs showing geometric structures that shouldn't exist in nature. Audio recordings of structured communications from an object that was supposed to be a chunk of interstellar ice and rock. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," the president finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We have confirmation that an artificial object constructed by a non-human intelligence has entered our solar system and is currently under intelligent control." Dr. Rodriguez nodded grimly. "Mr. President, based on our analysis of trajectory data, electromagnetic emissions, structural composition, and observed behaviors, we can state with 97.3% certainty that 3I/Atlas represents technology beyond current human capabilities." The silence that followed was broken only by the soft hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of DC traffic. For the first time in decades, the most powerful people on Earth were confronting a situation that their military might, economic influence, and political authority were completely powerless to control. The CIA director was the first to speak. "What's our intelligence assessment of its capabilities?" Dr. Rodriguez pulled up a new slide showing energy readings and propulsion analysis. The object demonstrates propulsion technology that appears to violate conservation of momentum. Its energy generation exceeds our best nuclear reactors. The materials composing its hull show properties we can't replicate with current metallurgy. And its communication systems operate on principles we don't understand. The room erupted in hushed but urgent conversations. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs leaned forward. "What are its intentions? Is it a threat?" "Unknown," Dr. Rodriguez replied. "The object appears to be conducting systematic observations of our solar system. It's deployed multiple smaller objects. We're tracking at least 14 of them that have taken up positions throughout the inner planets. But we've detected no hostile actions." The Secretary of Defense interrupted. "Define no hostile actions. If a foreign power sent surveillance equipment into our airspace, we'd consider that a hostile act." "With respect, Mr. Secretary," Dr. Rodriguez responded, "this isn't a foreign power. This is evidence of an intelligence that could probably destroy our entire civilization without breaking a sweat. The fact that it's limiting itself to passive observation might be the only reason we're sitting here having this conversation." The National Security Advisor pulled up a classified assessment prepared by the Defense Intelligence Agency. "Our analysis suggests the object possesses defensive capabilities that could neutralize any human weapons system. The technology gap is so vast that conventional military responses would be not just ineffective, but potentially suicidal." The CIA director cleared his throat. "How many people know about this?" "Globally, approximately 200 scientists, engineers, and government officials have access to classified data confirming the artificial nature of the object. The broader scientific community is aware of 3I/Atlas as an unusual interstellar visitor, but the full implications have been restricted to those with appropriate clearance levels. What happened next would set the stage for the largest coordinated cover-up in human history." The president looked around the room. "Gentlemen, ladies, I need your recommendations. How do we proceed?" The debate that followed lasted 6 hours and fundamentally changed the trajectory of human civilization. The director of NASA argued for immediate scientific engagement. "Mr. President, this represents the greatest opportunity for advancement in human history. If we could establish communication, if we could learn from their technology, we could solve energy crises, develop interstellar travel, maybe even eliminate disease and death." The Secretary of Defense presented the opposing view. Sir, we're talking about an intelligence that could view humanity the way we view insects. Our first priority must be planetary defense. We need to understand their capabilities, develop countermeasures, and prepare for the possibility that this is reconnaissance for invasion. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs supported the defense perspective. Every military analysis of technologically superior civilizations encountering inferior ones has resulted in the subjugation or elimination of the inferior civilization. We can't assume peaceful intentions. The CIA director raised intelligence concerns. The bigger issue is information control. If the public learns that we're being observed by superior alien intelligence, we're looking at potential social collapse, panic, economic disruption, religious upheaval, the breakdown of governmental authority. But it was the National Security Advisor who presented the argument that ultimately won the day. Mr. President, we're facing an unprecedented situation. If we confirm publicly that an alien intelligence has sent a probe to our solar system, we risk massive social, economic, and political disruption. Stock markets could crash, religious institutions could fracture, public panic could destabilize governments worldwide. He pulled up a classified study prepared by the Department of Homeland Security's Strategic Foresight Group. Our models suggest that immediate disclosure could result in widespread civil unrest, economic collapse, and the potential breakdown of international order. We need time to understand what we're dealing with and to prepare controlled disclosure protocols. The study was comprehensive and terrifying. Social psychologists had modeled public reaction to confirmation of extraterrestrial intelligence. The results suggested that between 20 and 40% of the population could experience severe psychological distress. Religious institutions might fracture as core theological assumptions were challenged. Economic systems could collapse as investors realized that human technology was essentially obsolete. The president asked the question that would define humanity's response to first contact. How long do we need? Minimum 12 months to develop comprehensive management strategies. Ideally 18 to 24 months to ensure global coordination and public preparation. The director of NASA objected. Sir, every day we delay is a lost opportunity to learn from the most advanced intelligence we've ever encountered. They're offering us knowledge that could transform human civilization. They're not offering us anything, the Secretary of Defense countered. They're conducting reconnaissance. For all we know, they're assessing our defenses before invasion. The debate continued through the morning, with each agency head presenting arguments based on their institutional perspective. But ultimately, the decision came down to a single question. Should humanity's response to first contact be driven by wonder or by fear? Fear won. And so, on April 3rd, 2025, the most momentous discovery in human history became classified under Executive Order 14,028, creating what would become known internally as Project Atlas Watch. The decision was made. 3I/Atlas would be studied in secret, its true nature hidden from humanity, while governments attempted to manage what they perceived as an existential threat to global stability. The irony was profound. The object that could represent humanity's graduation to cosmic citizenship was being treated as a threat to be contained rather than an opportunity to be embraced. But here's what's truly disturbing about this decision. It wasn't made by scientists seeking to understand the universe. It wasn't made by philosophers contemplating humanity's cosmic significance. It was made by politicians and military leaders whose primary concern was maintaining power and control. Within 72 hours of that meeting, the cover-up machinery was in full motion. Academic research was redirected through defense contractors. University astronomy departments received sudden influxes of national security funding that came with ironclad non-disclosure requirements. international space agencies were quietly brought into coordination protocols under the guise of planetary defense initiatives. The FBI's Counterintelligence Division created a special unit dedicated to monitoring and controlling information related to 3 I/Atlas. The NSA established dedicated communication channels for coordinating international cover-up efforts. Even the Treasury Department was briefed on potential economic impacts and given authority to intervene in financial markets if disclosure seemed imminent. The public story remained consistent. 3 I/Atlas was an interesting but ultimately mundane interstellar visitor, noteworthy primarily for its size and trajectory. Nothing more. Press releases were carefully crafted to acknowledge the object's existence while downplaying any unusual characteristics. Scientific papers were restricted to narrow technical analyses that avoided broader implications. Media coverage was subtly discouraged through the strategic placement of more interesting space stories that drew public attention away from ongoing analysis. But behind the scenes, the largest scientific and intelligence operation in history was mobilizing to understand, monitor, and ultimately conceal humanity's first confirmed contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. The question we should all be asking is simple. Who gave them the right to make this decision for all of humanity? Part 4. International Secrets. April 15th, 2025. GCHQ. Headquarters, Cheltenham, United Kingdom. While the American government was implementing Project Atlas Watch, intelligence agencies worldwide were conducting their own analyses of the 3 I/Atlas situation, and what they discovered forced an unprecedented level of international cooperation, the kind that only emerges when humanity faces a threat that transcends national boundaries. The Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance, United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand activated what they called cosmic protocols, classified contingency plans developed during the Cold War for managing extraterrestrial contact scenarios. These protocols, declassified documents later revealed, had been gathering dust in secure facilities for over 60 years, written by visionary intelligence analysts who understood that first contact would be as much a national security issue as a scientific one. Sir Malcolm Richardson, director of GCHQ, had been briefed on these protocols only once during his entire career, during his initial appointment to the position. "I thought they were science fiction," he later admitted in classified parliamentary testimony. Theoretical frameworks for dealing with hypothetical scenarios that would never actually occur. Now I realize they were the most important documents in our archives. The cosmic protocols outlined specific procedures for information control, international coordination, and public management during extraterrestrial contact scenarios. They included pre-negotiated frameworks for sharing intelligence, established communication channels that bypassed normal diplomatic protocols, and even detailed plans for managing economic and social disruption. But the cooperation extended far beyond traditional allies. On April 18th, in an extraordinary diplomatic move, representatives from the Chinese National Space Administration met secretly with NASA officials at a neutral location in Switzerland. The meeting, which has never been officially acknowledged by either government, resulted in the establishment of direct communication channels for sharing 3 I/Atlas observation data. The location was carefully chosen, a private conference facility in Geneva that had previously hosted sensitive nuclear disarmament negotiations. The participants included senior space agency officials, intelligence representatives, and high-level diplomats with authority to commit their governments to unprecedented cooperation agreements. Dr. Li Wei, Deputy Director of the Chinese Academy of Sciences' National Astronomical Observatories, later described the moment when Chinese and American scientists first compared their independent analyses of the object. We realized immediately that this transcended any earthly political considerations. We were looking at evidence of intelligence that made our human conflicts seem insignificant. The Chinese analysis had been conducted completely independently using their own observation facilities and analytical methods. When the data was compared with American findings, the correlation was impossible to ignore. Both nations had reached identical conclusions about the artificial nature of 3I/Atlas. It was a moment of profound clarity, noted Dr. Sarah Kim, the American lead scientist at the Geneva meeting. Here were two nations that had been engaged in technological and political competition for decades, and suddenly we were united by the recognition that we were both essentially children compared to whatever intelligence had sent 3I/Atlas. The Russians, initially suspicious of Western motives, were brought into the cooperation framework after their own analysis of 3I/Atlas confirmed its artificial nature. The Roscosmos space agency, working with classified data from their advanced tracking stations in Siberia, had detected electromagnetic signatures from the object that matched no known natural phenomena. Dr. Alexei Volkov, director of the Russian Space Research Institute, had been conducting his analysis in complete isolation, unaware that other nations were studying the same object. When Russian intelligence learned about the international cooperation efforts, they initially suspected a trap. "We thought the Americans were trying to trick us into revealing our space surveillance capabilities," Dr. Volkov later explained in a classified debrief. But when we saw their data, when we realized they had discovered the same impossible things we had discovered, we understood that this was bigger than any human rivalry. By late April 2025, a shadow international consortium was operating at the highest levels of global intelligence and space agencies. The European Space Agency, the Indian Space Research Organization, the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency, all were quietly coordinating their most sensitive observations through encrypted channels that bypassed normal diplomatic protocols. The cooperation was unprecedented in scope and secrecy. Nations that had been rivals for decades were suddenly sharing their most advanced space surveillance capabilities. Intelligence agencies were providing data to traditional adversaries. Military space assets were being coordinated through international command structures that existed nowhere in official government documents. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this international cooperation was what it revealed about the object itself. When data from observatories worldwide was consolidated and analyzed using the combined processing power of intelligence agencies across 6 continents, the picture that emerged was even more extraordinary than individual governments had realized. 3I/Atlas wasn't alone. The smaller objects that had been deployed throughout the solar system, initially thought to be debris or secondary components, were revealed through coordinated tracking to be sophisticated probes conducting systematic surveillance of every major celestial body in our system. These probes, each roughly the size of a city bus, had positioned themselves in stable orbits around Mars, Venus, Earth, and even the outer gas giants. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, coordinating the international tracking effort from the Deep Space Network, made the discovery that changed everything. When we combined observation data from 73 facilities across 6 continents, we found that the deployment pattern wasn't random. These probes are positioned to observe not just planetary surfaces, but space traffic, communication satellites, and even our deep space missions. They were watching us, all of us, and they had been strategically positioned to observe not just our planet, but our entire solar system's infrastructure. The surveillance network was comprehensive and intelligent. Probes positioned near Earth were monitoring everything from GPS satellites to the International Space Station. The probe orbiting Mars was observing both the planet's surface and the various robotic missions operating there. Even the probes stationed near the outer planets were positioned to intercept and analyze any human communications or spacecraft that might venture into the outer solar system. But the most unsettling discovery was that the probes were adaptive. They adjusted their positions based on human space activities. When NASA launched a routine satellite, the probe nearest Earth shifted orbit to optimize observation of the launch. When the European Space Agency conducted communication tests with their Mars orbiter, the probe near Mars moved to better intercept the signals. The international intelligence community faced an unprecedented challenge. How do you keep secret the fact that humanity is under active observation by a superior intelligence? The solution was as elegant as it was disturbing. A classified protocol known as Information Compartmentalization Directive 7 was implemented across all participating nations. Scientists studying 3I/Atlas were divided into isolated research cells, each with access only to specific aspects of the data. No single research team, except for a handful of cleared intelligence analysts, had access to the complete picture. Astronomers studying the object's trajectory were kept separate from teams analyzing its electromagnetic emissions. Engineers examining its structural composition never saw the data on its propulsion systems. Communications specialists intercepting its transmissions were isolated from the teams tracking the deployment of surveillance probes. Dr. Marcus Thompson, a senior researcher who had been cleared for multiple compartments, described the system. They created a scientific Tower of Babel. Each team was working on pieces of the puzzle, but no one was allowed to see how the pieces fit together. It was brilliant from a security perspective, but it was destroying the scientific method. This compartmentalization served two purposes. It prevented leaks by ensuring that no individual scientist fully understood the implications of what they were studying, and it maintained plausible deniability by allowing governments to truthfully claim that no conclusive evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence had been confirmed, because no single study had been allowed to reach that conclusion. Meanwhile, the public received carefully curated information designed to maintain the illusion of normalcy. Press releases described 3I/Atlas as an unusually large interstellar comet with interesting but explainable properties. Scientific journals published papers focusing on narrow technical aspects of the object, while omitting the broader context that would reveal its true nature. Media coverage was subtly discouraged through the strategic placement of more interesting space stories that drew public attention away from the ongoing analysis. The media management was sophisticated and multi-layered. Science journalists who showed too much interest in 3I/Atlas found themselves offered exclusive access to other space stories. Press conferences about the object were scheduled during major news events to minimize coverage. Even social media algorithms were subtly adjusted to reduce the visibility of posts discussing unusual aspects of the interstellar visitor. But the most insidious aspect of the cover-up was how it corrupted the scientific process itself. Researchers who attempted to publish comprehensive analyses found their papers rejected by journals whose editors had received national security guidance. Grant funding was redirected away from independent 3I/Atlas research and toward projects that supported the classified investigation. Scientists who persisted in asking uncomfortable questions found themselves excluded from conferences, denied access to telescope time, and quietly pushed toward the margins of their fields. Dr. Robert Hendricks, a respected astrophysicist at MIT, described the experience. It was like watching science itself become classified. Questions that should have been at the center of astronomical research were suddenly forbidden. Careers were destroyed, not for bad science, but for good science that reached inconvenient conclusions. The suppression wasn't limited to preventing new research. Historical data was also being retroactively classified. Papers that had been published years earlier about interstellar objects were suddenly restricted. Conference presentations from previous years were removed from public archives. Even textbooks were being quietly updated to remove references to certain astronomical phenomena. By June 2025, the international scientific community had been effectively neutered. The greatest discovery in human history was being studied by intelligence agencies rather than scientists, analysed through the lens of national security rather than human knowledge, and managed as a threat to be contained rather than a breakthrough to be celebrated. And still, the object continued its systematic exploration of our solar system, its intentions as mysterious as its origins, while humanity's leaders prioritized control over truth, secrecy over transparency, and fear over wonder. The tragic irony was inescapable. The very institutions that had been created to expand human knowledge and protect human welfare were being used to suppress the most important discovery in our species' history. Part 5. The Impossible Behaviour. May 27th, 2025. Deep Space Network, Goldstone, California. Dr. Marcus Thompson had been monitoring deep space objects for 15 years, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for what he observed that Tuesday morning as 3I/Atlas began its closest approach to Earth. The object wasn't just defying conventional physics anymore. It was demonstrating capabilities that challenged our understanding of what was possible in the universe. At exactly 1432 UTC, as 3I/Atlas passed within 35 million kilometers of Earth, it executed a maneuver that sent shockwaves through the classified scientific community. Without any visible propulsion exhaust, without ejecting mass, without any mechanism that should have been capable of altering its trajectory, the object performed a precise 90-degree course correction. It's like watching a car turn a corner in space, Dr. Thompson reported in his classified log entry, except there's no road, no wheels, no visible means of propulsion. It just changed direction. The maneuver violated everything scientists understood about space navigation. Every human spacecraft achieves trajectory changes by ejecting reaction mass, rocket fuel, compressed gas, even ion particles. Newton's third law demands that for every action, there must be an equal and opposite reaction. But 3I/Atlas was changing direction without any detectable reaction. Dr. Thompson immediately initiated emergency protocols, activating every sensor array under his command. Radio telescopes scanned for exhaust signatures. Infrared detectors searched for thermal emissions that might indicate propulsion systems. Even gravitational wave detectors were tasked to look for space-time distortions that might explain the impossible maneuver. Nothing. The object simply changed direction, as if the laws of physics were optional suggestions rather than fundamental constraints. The maneuver lasted exactly 17 minutes and resulted in the object assuming a new trajectory that would take it on a systematic tour of the inner solar system's most significant gravitational bodies: Earth, Mars, the asteroid belt, Jupiter's major moons. It was conducting a survey, a deliberate, methodical exploration of our cosmic neighborhood. But the course correction was just the beginning of 3I/Atlas's impossible demonstrations. On June 3rd, astronomers at the Arecibo Radio Observatory, before its tragic collapse later that year, detected structured electromagnetic pulses emanating from the object that exhibited properties unlike anything in the known universe. The pulses weren't random noise or natural plasma emissions. They were encoded, modulated, and targeted. Dr. Sarah Hendricks, the lead radio astronomer on the project, described them in her classified report as artificial communications displaying mathematical precision, linguistic structure, and intentional directionality. The signals represented a breakthrough in understanding 3I/Atlas's capabilities, but also raised disturbing questions about its intentions. The electromagnetic emissions weren't the chaotic radio noise typical of natural cosmic phenomena. Instead, they showed clear signs of information encoding using mathematical principles that suggested advanced intelligence. We're looking at carrier waves modulated with complex data streams, Dr. Hendricks explained in her classified briefing. The base frequencies correspond to fundamental physical constants: the hydrogen line, the speed of light, Planck's constant. But the modulation patterns contain information structures that appear to be intentionally designed for comprehension by technological civilizations. The signals were being transmitted toward specific coordinates in space. Some were directed at the surveillance probes 3I/Atlas had deployed throughout the solar system. Others were aimed at precise locations in interstellar space, suggesting communication with distant sources far beyond our solar system. But perhaps the most unsettling discovery was that some of the transmissions were directed at Earth itself. The signals targeted major population centers, government facilities, and scientific installations with pinpoint accuracy. They weren't random broadcasts, but rather seemed to be gathering specific information about human civilization, technology, and infrastructure. Dr. Hendricks's team traced the signal paths and discovered that 3I/Atlas was systematically scanning Earth's electromagnetic signatures, radio transmissions from major cities, radar emissions from military installations, communication signals from satellite networks, even the electromagnetic signatures of nuclear power plants and particle accelerators. It's conducting the most comprehensive intelligence-gathering operation in history, Dr. Hendricks noted. They're mapping our entire technological infrastructure down to individual communication nodes. 3I/Atlas was studying us as systematically as we were studying it. On June 15th, the object demonstrated another capability that redefined the limits of what the classified research teams thought possible. As 3I/Atlas approached the asteroid belt, it began deploying additional objects, not the bus-sized surveillance probes it had released earlier, but smaller devices roughly the size of automobiles. These new deployments were different in both function and behavior. Unlike the passive observation probes, these new objects were interactive. Dr. James Okafor at the European Space Agency's Mission Control Center in Darmstadt, Germany, was the first to observe what these new objects were doing. They're not just positioned randomly, he reported in an encrypted communication to ESA leadership. They're forming geometric patterns, networks, as if they're setting up some kind of infrastructure in space. The deployment process was mesmerizing to watch through long-range telescopes. 3I/Atlas would slow its rotation, and small objects would emerge from what appeared to be launch bays along its hull. These objects would then accelerate using the same impossible propulsion system as their parent vessel, positioning themselves with mathematical precision throughout the asteroid belt. The new objects positioned themselves in mathematically precise formations throughout the asteroid belt, creating what appeared to be a three-dimensional grid extending across millions of cubic kilometers of space. Each object maintained its position with extraordinary accuracy, adjusting continuously to account for gravitational influences and orbital mechanics. Dr. Okafor's analysis revealed that the grid wasn't random. The objects were positioned at gravitational Lagrange points, locations where the gravitational forces of multiple bodies create stable orbital positions. But they were also positioned to optimize coverage of space traffic routes that humans might use for deep space exploration. They're creating a monitoring network that will detect any human attempt to travel beyond the inner solar system, Dr. Okafor concluded. It's like they're setting up a cosmic customs checkpoint. But the true purpose of this space-based network became clear when something unprecedented happened. On June 22nd, a small asteroid, designated 2025 JL47, was detected on a collision course with one of 3I/Atlas's surveillance probes orbiting Mars. Natural cosmic collisions happen regularly. They're part of the chaotic dance of objects in space. What happened next violated every law of physics in our textbooks. As the asteroid approached the probe, one of the objects from the newly deployed grid network emitted a focused energy beam that instantly vaporized the incoming projectile. The beam lasted 0.3 seconds, traveled 47 million kilometers, and completely eliminated a 15-meter-wide chunk of rock and metal without producing any detectable debris field. The energy requirements for this demonstration were staggering. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, analyzing the data from multiple observation stations, calculated that the beam had delivered approximately 10 to the power of 18 joules of energy, equivalent to the total energy output of a major power plant for several days, in less than half a second. We're looking at directed energy weapons that make our most advanced military systems look like flashlights, she reported in her classified analysis. The precision is perfect, the power is incomprehensible, and the range exceeds anything we thought possible. The probe remained undamaged. The threat was neutralized. The demonstration was unmistakable. 3I/Atlas had defensive capabilities, but the demonstration served multiple purposes. It protected the surveillance probe, yes, but it also sent a clear message to human observers. The monitoring network was protected by weapon systems that could eliminate threats across interplanetary distances with perfect accuracy. Dr. Rachel Moss at the Space Surveillance Network immediately understood the implications. "We're not just observing reconnaissance technology," she wrote in her classified analysis. "We're looking at a complete technological ecosystem capable of self-defense, resource manipulation, and controlled intervention in natural processes." The defensive demonstration also revealed something else about 3I/Atlas's capabilities: real-time coordination across vast distances. The grid object that fired the defensive beam was over 100 million kilometers from the probe it was protecting, yet the response was instantaneous and perfectly coordinated. "They've solved faster-than-light communication," Dr. Moss noted. "The coordination required for that defensive response suggests information transfer that ignores the speed of light limitation." But the demonstrations weren't finished. Throughout July 2025, as 3I/Atlas continued its survey of the solar system, it began exhibiting what could only be described as adaptive behavior. The object modified its surveillance patterns based on human activities, adjusted its communication frequencies to avoid detection by civilian radio telescopes, and even demonstrated the ability to repair minor damage to its hull caused by micrometeorite impacts. The adaptive behavior was particularly unsettling. When NASA attempted to communicate with 3I/Atlas using the Deep Space Network, the object immediately changed its transmission frequencies to avoid interference with the human signals. When the European Space Agency launched a deep space probe, 3I/Atlas adjusted its trajectory to optimize observation of the launch. It was learning, adapting, evolving its behavior based on observation and experience. Dr. Lisa Anderson, a cognitive scientist studying the object's behavioral patterns for the classified program, made a disturbing observation. "We're not just looking at artificial intelligence. We're looking at intelligence that's actively studying and adapting to human behavior in real time. It's learning our patterns, predicting our actions, and modifying its own behavior accordingly." The self-repair capabilities were equally impressive and terrifying. When high-resolution imaging detected small impact craters on 3I/Atlas's hull from micrometeorite strikes, the damage disappeared within hours. The hull material apparently could restructure itself at the molecular level to repair damage automatically. "We're observing programmable matter," reported Dr. Sarah Kim, a materials scientist working on the classified analysis. "The hull isn't just metal or ceramic. It's a material that can alter its structure, composition, and properties based on external conditions or internal commands." By the end of July, the classified research community had reached a disturbing consensus. 3I/Atlas wasn't just an artificial probe sent by an extraterrestrial intelligence. It was an autonomous system displaying characteristics consistent with advanced artificial intelligence, possibly more advanced than anything humans had ever conceived. The object demonstrated planning capabilities that extended across months of operations. It showed creativity in problem solving when faced with unexpected situations. Most importantly, it exhibited what appeared to be genuine curiosity about human civilization, actively seeking out new information about our technology, society, and capabilities. It's not following a predetermined program, Dr. Anderson concluded. It's making decisions, forming hypotheses, conducting experiments. We're observing machine consciousness that exceeds human cognitive capabilities in processing speed, analytical depth, and creative problem solving. And it was still out there, continuing its systematic study of human civilization, deploying infrastructure throughout our solar system, and demonstrating capabilities that made our most advanced technology look primitive by comparison. The question that kept intelligence analysts awake at night was simple. What would happen when it finished gathering information and decided to make contact? But an even more disturbing question was emerging from the data. What if 3I/Atlas wasn't here to make contact at all? What if it was here to conduct an evaluation of human civilization? And what if humanity was failing that evaluation? Part 6. The Technology Gap. August 14th, 2025. Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. Classified Technology Assessment Division. Dr. Elena Vasquez stared at the holographic display showing 3I/Atlas's energy signature and felt the familiar chill that had accompanied every major breakthrough in the classified study over the past 5 months. The numbers on her screen represented something that shouldn't exist according to our current understanding of physics. The object was generating power equivalent to a small nuclear reactor, constantly, without fuel, without waste products, without any detectable energy source. Run the calculations again, she told her team of theoretical physicists and aerospace engineers, all of whom held the highest security clearances available to civilian scientists. They ran the calculations 17 more times. The results remained impossibly consistent. 3I/Atlas was violating the conservation of energy, one of the most fundamental laws of physics, or it was utilizing an energy source so advanced that human science couldn't detect or understand it. The energy analysis had been conducted using every detection method available to human science. Thermal imaging revealed no significant heat generation. Spectroscopic analysis detected no fusion signatures. Gravitational wave detectors found no evidence of exotic matter reactions. Yet the object was continuously generating terawatts of power. Dr. Michael Chen, the laboratory's senior nuclear physicist, presented his analysis to the assembled team with the grim precision of a coroner delivering a cause of death. If this object is generating power through controlled fusion, antimatter annihilation, or some form of zero-point energy manipulation, it represents technology that is centuries, possibly millennia, ahead of our current capabilities. The implications were staggering. Human civilization's most advanced nuclear reactors achieved fusion reactions under enormous pressure and temperature, requiring massive containment systems and producing radioactive waste. 3I/Atlas was generating comparable energy with no detectable fuel source, no containment systems, and no waste products. We're looking at energy generation that operates on principles we can't even theorize about, Dr. Chen continued. Our best guess is that they've learned to extract energy directly from the quantum vacuum, but that requires technology so advanced that we can't even imagine how it might work. But the energy source was just one aspect of a technological gap so vast, it challenged human comprehension. The propulsion system demonstrated by 3I/Atlas during its various course corrections appeared to operate without reaction mass, the fundamental principle that governs all human space travel. Every rocket, every spacecraft, every method of propulsion ever developed by human engineering works by ejecting material in one direction to generate thrust in the opposite direction. 3I/Atlas was accelerating without ejecting anything. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, on loan from NASA's Breakthrough Propulsion Physics program, had spent 6 weeks analyzing the data from the object's maneuvers. Her conclusion was as simple as it was revolutionary. We're observing controlled manipulation of space-time itself. The object isn't pushing against anything. It's altering the geometry of space around itself to achieve acceleration. The propulsion analysis had required developing entirely new mathematical models. Traditional rocket equations were useless when applied to 3 I/Atlas's movement patterns. The object was accelerating in ways that suggested it was manipulating the fundamental structure of space and time. Think of it like creating a hill in space-time and then rolling down that hill, Dr. Walsh explained to the Classified Oversight Committee. Except they're creating the hill, controlling the roll, and somehow making the hill disappear behind them. It's propulsion that operates on the level of reality itself. In layman's terms, 3 I/Atlas had mastered a form of propulsion that human scientists could barely theorize about, let alone replicate. But the technology gap extended beyond energy and propulsion. The materials composing the object exhibited properties that defied our understanding of engineering and chemistry. Spectroscopic analysis revealed a hull composition that appeared to be a single, continuous material rather than an assembly of components. No welding, no joints, no signs of manufacturing processes. Dr. Sarah Kim, a materials scientist specializing in exotic matter research, described it as programmable matter, material that can alter its structure, properties, and function at the molecular level based on external commands or environmental conditions. The hull material wasn't just strong, it was adaptable. When exposed to micrometeorite impacts, it restructured itself to repair damage. When 3 I/Atlas needed to deploy probes, sections of the hull opened and reformed seamlessly. When different mission requirements demanded different surface properties, the material altered its reflectivity, conductivity, and even its apparent density. We're looking at matter that's been programmed like software, Dr. Kim reported. The hull isn't just a protective barrier, it's a dynamic, responsive system that can become whatever the mission requires. The object could heal itself when damaged. It could modify its surface properties to optimize for different functions. It could literally reshape itself as needed. Human materials science was perhaps 1,000 years away from achieving anything comparable. The most advanced smart materials could change shape or properties in response to temperature or electrical signals. But 3 I/Atlas's hull was demonstrating molecular level control that suggested matter itself had been redesigned to be programmable. Even more disturbing was the evidence of what appeared to be self-replication capabilities. The surveillance probes deployed throughout the solar system weren't just static observation devices. They were manufacturing additional components, harvesting materials from asteroids and planetary atmospheres, and expanding their operational capabilities autonomously. Dr. Robert Hendricks from the Classified AI Research Division had been tracking the probe network for months. His findings were both fascinating and terrifying. Each probe is not just gathering information, it's building infrastructure, establishing permanent installations, and creating a technological presence in our solar system that will persist long after the primary object departs. The probes were observed extracting metals from asteroids, collecting gases from planetary atmospheres, and even harvesting solar radiation to power manufacturing processes. They were building additional equipment, expanding their sensor arrays, and creating communication networks that spanned the entire solar system. We're looking at self-sustaining, self-improving technology, Dr. Hendricks reported. Von Neumann machines that can reproduce, adapt, and evolve. If they wanted to, they could probably fill our entire solar system with their technology within a few decades. The artificial intelligence demonstrated by 3 I/Atlas represented another technological chasm. Human AI systems, even our most advanced models, operate through pattern recognition and statistical analysis. They process information and generate responses based on training data and programmed parameters. 3i/Atlas was displaying genuine creativity, strategic thinking, and adaptive problem-solving that suggested consciousness rather than computation. Dr. Lisa Anderson, a cognitive scientist studying the object's behavioral patterns, had been analyzing decision-making processes displayed by both the main object and its deployed probes. The complexity was overwhelming. "It's not following a predetermined program," explained Dr. Anderson. "It's learning, planning, and making decisions based on novel situations and unexpected circumstances. We're observing emergent intelligence that surpasses human cognitive capabilities in processing speed, analytical depth, and creative problem-solving." The AI system seemed to understand human psychology and behavior in ways that suggested deep analysis of human civilization. It anticipated human responses to its activities, adapted its surveillance patterns to human schedules, and even demonstrated what appeared to be curiosity about human artistic and cultural expressions. It's studying us not just as a technological civilization, but as a species with complex social behaviors, emotional responses, and creative capabilities, Dr. Anderson noted. The depth of analysis suggests intelligence that understands consciousness itself. The communications technology alone represented a leap forward that would revolutionize human civilization if we could understand and replicate it. The object's transmissions utilized quantum entanglement effects that allowed instantaneous communication across interstellar distances, no time delay, no signal degradation, perfect information transfer that ignored the fundamental limitations imposed by the speed of light. Dr. Marcus Johnson from the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency had been studying the communication systems with a team of quantum physicists. Their analysis revealed technology that operated on principles barely understood by human science. If we could reverse engineer just this one aspect of their technology, noted Dr. Johnson, we could establish real-time communication networks spanning the galaxy. The implications for science, commerce, and human expansion into space are incalculable. But perhaps the most humbling realization was the sheer scale of the technology gap. Every aspect of 3i/Atlas, its energy generation, propulsion, materials, artificial intelligence, manufacturing capabilities, and communication systems, represented not incremental advances beyond human technology, but fundamental paradigm shifts that suggested a civilization millions of years more advanced than our own. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, preparing her briefing for the National Security Council, struggled to find analogies that could convey the magnitude of the technological disparity. "We're looking at technology that makes our most advanced achievements look like stone tools by comparison," she summarized. "The gap between their capabilities and ours is so vast that attempting to understand or replicate their technology with our current knowledge base would be like asking a medieval blacksmith to build a computer chip." The technology assessment revealed that 3i/Atlas represented not just advanced engineering, but a complete transformation of how intelligence could manipulate matter, energy, space, and time. It was technology that suggested its creators had solved fundamental problems that human science was only beginning to recognize. And yet, despite this overwhelming technological superiority, 3i/Atlas had made no hostile moves toward Earth. It had demonstrated defensive capabilities, but had shown no aggression toward human activities or installations. This raised the most unsettling question of all. If they possessed technology capable of effortlessly overwhelming human civilization, why were they limiting themselves to passive observation and data gathering? What were they waiting for? The answer, intelligence analysts were beginning to suspect, was that 3i/Atlas wasn't waiting for anything. It was evaluating, testing, determining whether humanity deserved to learn about the universe beyond our tiny corner of space. and the evaluation wasn't going well. Part 7. Institutional Control. September 3rd, 2025. Department of Justice, Washington, D.C. Classified Legal Affairs Division. The memo that crossed Attorney General Patricia Williams' desk that Tuesday morning would fundamentally alter the relationship between scientific discovery and national security in ways that would have horrified the founding fathers of American democracy. Constitutional Analysis, Extension of Invention Secrecy Act to cover astronomical discoveries, read the header of the 47-page classified document prepared by the government's most senior constitutional lawyers. For over 70 years, the Invention Secrecy Act had allowed the federal government to classify and suppress technological innovations deemed harmful to national security. Patents for certain weapons technologies, cryptographic systems, and nuclear processes had been routinely suppressed under these provisions. But the 3I/Atlas situation required an unprecedented expansion of government secrecy powers. The legal justification was complex and deeply troubling. The document argued that knowledge itself could be classified as a national security asset, that scientific discoveries could be treated as state secrets, and that the constitutional guarantee of free speech could be suspended when the information posed existential threats to social stability. The discovery of extraterrestrial intelligence and technology, the memo argued, represents a potential threat to national security that transcends traditional concepts of classified information. We recommend immediate expansion of secrecy provisions to cover astronomical observations, scientific analysis, and academic research related to potential non-human intelligence. The legal framework was based on wartime precedents that had never been applied during peacetime. The attorneys cited cases from World War II when scientific research had been classified for national security purposes. They referenced Cold War legislation that had restricted publication of nuclear research. They even invoked Civil War-era laws that had suspended constitutional rights during national emergencies. But this was different. This wasn't wartime censorship or nuclear security. This was the classification of human knowledge itself. Within 48 hours, the recommendation had been approved through emergency executive powers. The approval process bypassed normal legislative review. It was classified under executive privilege, implemented through emergency national security directives, and enforced through existing intelligence agency authorities. Congress wasn't consulted. Federal judges weren't briefed. Even most cabinet members were kept in the dark. On September 5th, 2025, universities, research institutions, and private companies across the United States received identical classified directives. Any research related to interstellar objects, anomalous astronomical phenomena, or unconventional propulsion systems was now subject to mandatory government review and potential classification. The directives were delivered by teams of federal agents who arrived without warning at astronomy departments, physics laboratories, and aerospace companies across the country. The documents they carried had the force of law, backed by criminal penalties for non-compliance. Dr. James Peterson, chairman of the astronomy department at Harvard University, described the moment these directives arrived as the death of open scientific inquiry in America. They didn't just classify our research, he later wrote, in a private journal that was subsequently seized by federal agents. They classified the very questions we were allowed to ask about the universe. The scope of the suppression was breathtaking. Research into interstellar objects was classified. Studies of anomalous propulsion systems were restricted. Even theoretical papers about potential extraterrestrial intelligence were subject to government review before publication. Universities that had been pillars of academic freedom for centuries suddenly found themselves operating under the same security restrictions as nuclear weapons laboratories. Professors who had spent their careers studying the cosmos were required to obtain security clearances before continuing their research. The suppression operation extended far beyond academic institutions. Major defense contractors, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, were quietly brought into a massive classified research program, codenamed Project Prometheus. Their mission: reverse engineer extraterrestrial technology for potential military applications. The contractors were given access to selected data from the 3I/Atlas analysis with the goal of understanding and replicating the object's advanced capabilities. Billions of dollars in black budget funding were redirected through shell companies and classified appropriations. Engineers and scientists who had spent their careers working on conventional aerospace projects suddenly found themselves studying propulsion systems that violated the laws of physics and materials that shouldn't exist according to human chemistry. We went from designing fighter jets to trying to understand technology that makes our most advanced systems look like horse-drawn carriages, one anonymous Boeing engineer revealed in a leaked audio recording. And we were forbidden from discussing our work with anyone, including our own families. The psychological toll on researchers was severe. Scientists who had devoted their lives to expanding human knowledge found themselves prohibited from sharing the most important discoveries in history. Engineers who had always worked on the cutting edge of technology were suddenly studying systems so advanced that they couldn't understand basic operating principles. The legal apparatus supporting this unprecedented suppression operation was as comprehensive as it was constitutionally questionable. Federal judges in major metropolitan areas received classified briefings on the national security implications of potential extraterrestrial contact. Court orders were pre-drafted to suppress publication of sensitive research. Gag orders were prepared for journalists who might attempt to investigate the story. The judicial briefings were conducted in sealed sessions with judges sworn to secrecy about even the existence of the briefings. Legal precedents were established for classifying scientific research under national security provisions. Constitutional protections for academic freedom and freedom of speech were suspended for matters relating to non-terrestrial intelligence. Even more disturbing, the suppression operation wasn't limited to preventing public disclosure. It was actively distorting the scientific record. Research journals were pressured to reject papers that might contain sensitive astronomical observations. Conference presentations were monitored and sanitized. International scientific collaborations were severed if they posed risks to information compartmentalization protocols. Dr. Sarah Henderson, editor of the Astrophysical Journal, later described the pressure she faced during this period. We received guidance about which types of papers posed national security concerns. Scientists began self-censoring, avoiding certain topics, steering their research towards safer areas. We weren't just suppressing specific discoveries, we were killing scientific curiosity itself. The journal editors were given detailed lists of prohibited topics, restricted methodologies, and even forbidden mathematical models. Papers that had been accepted for publication were withdrawn. Researchers were forced to remove sections from their work or abandon projects entirely. The scientific publishing system, which had operated on principles of open inquiry for centuries, was transformed into an instrument of information control. The international implications were equally troubling. American allies were pressured to implement similar suppression protocols in their own countries. The European Union quietly passed emergency regulations classifying certain types of astronomical research under their Defence and Security Procurement Directive. The UK invoked rarely used provisions of their Official Secrets Act to suppress academic research at Cambridge and Oxford. International scientific conferences were monitored and controlled. Researchers were prevented from travelling to meetings where they might discuss sensitive topics. Even private conversations between scientists from different countries were subject to surveillance and potential legal action. The global scientific community, which had operated through international cooperation for generations, was fragmented into isolated national compartments, each controlled by their respective intelligence agencies. Scientists who refused to comply faced professional destruction. Dr. Maria Santos, a respected astrophysicist at the California Institute of Technology, attempted to publish a paper analyzing anomalous electromagnetic signatures from interstellar objects. Within a week of submitting her research, she found her security clearance revoked, her grant funding eliminated, and her access to observational data terminated. "They didn't just classify my research," she told a colleague in a conversation later intercepted by federal surveillance. "They made it impossible for me to continue working as a scientist in America." Dr. Santos's experience was repeated across the country. Researchers who asked uncomfortable questions found themselves unemployable. Scientists who persisted in pursuing forbidden topics were blacklisted from conferences, denied telescope time, and excluded from collaborative projects. The message was clear: comply with the suppression directives or lose your career. But the suppression operation faced a fundamental problem. Scientific truth has a way of emerging, despite institutional efforts to contain it. Leaked documents began appearing on secure communication platforms. Anonymous sources within classified programs started reaching out to journalists. Scientists began developing coded language and informal networks to share sanitized versions of their suppressed research. The leaks were small and carefully disguised, but they painted a consistent picture. Something extraordinary was happening in space, and governments worldwide were working together to hide it from the public. The government's response was swift and comprehensive. The Department of Homeland Security created a new division focused on scientific information security with broad powers to monitor, investigate, and prosecute unauthorized disclosure of sensitive astronomical information. The new division operated like a scientific secret police. Agents monitored university email systems, analyzed research publications for coded references to classified topics, and conducted background investigations on scientists who showed too much curiosity about certain subjects. Federal agents began conducting interviews with scientists, journalists, and academics who had shown interest in interstellar objects or anomalous space phenomena. These weren't criminal investigations. They were described as voluntary cooperation assessments. But the message was clear. Curiosity about certain topics would be met with federal scrutiny. The interviews were designed to intimidate rather than gather information. Scientists were asked detailed questions about their research interests, their personal beliefs about extraterrestrial life, and their contacts with international colleagues. The subtext was unmistakable. "We're watching you." By October 2025, the American scientific community existed in a state of carefully managed fear. Researchers self-censored their work, avoided collaboration with international colleagues, and steered their investigations away from topics that might attract unwanted government attention. The land of the free had become a place where asking certain questions about the universe was considered a threat to national security. Graduate students abandoned dissertation projects that might touch on forbidden topics. Postdoctoral researchers chose safer career paths rather than risk association with sensitive research. Even undergraduate courses were modified to avoid discussing subjects that might encourage dangerous curiosity. The suppression was creating a generation of scientists trained to avoid the most important questions in their fields. And meanwhile, 3i/Atlas continued its systematic survey of human civilization, its surveillance probes expanding throughout the solar system, its artificial intelligence gathering data about a species that had chosen to respond to first contact not with wonder or curiosity, but with fear and suppression. The irony was profound and heartbreaking. Humanity's first contact with superior intelligence had become an opportunity to demonstrate our least admirable characteristics: fear of knowledge, suppression of truth, and the prioritization of institutional control over human advancement. We were being evaluated by beings capable of transforming our civilization, and we were showing them our worst impulses rather than our highest aspirations. Part 8. The Social Dimension. October 12th, 2025. Department of Homeland Security. Strategic Social Impact Assessment Division. Deep within a nondescript office building in Arlington, Virginia, sociologists, psychologists, economists, and cultural anthropologists were conducting the most comprehensive analysis of potential social disruption in American history. Their mission: model the complete collapse of human civilization that might result from confirming the existence of extraterrestrial intelligence. Dr. Rebecca Morrison, a social psychologist who had spent her career studying mass panic and social breakdown, led the team developing what would become known as the Disclosure Impact Matrix, a classified framework for understanding how humanity might react to learning the truth about 3I/Atlas. The team had been working around the clock for months, creating computer models that simulated human social behavior under various disclosure scenarios. They had consulted historical precedents, conducted classified psychological studies, and even run limited test scenarios to gauge public reaction to hypothetical extraterrestrial contact. The preliminary findings were catastrophic. Our models suggest that immediate, uncontrolled disclosure of extraterrestrial intelligence could trigger societal collapse within 72 hours, Dr. Morrison reported in her classified briefing to DHS leadership. We're looking at potential bank runs, supply chain breakdown, mass religious upheaval, and complete loss of governmental authority. The social modeling had involved extensive analysis of human behavior during historical crisis events. The team studied public reactions to the 1938 War of the Worlds radio broadcast, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the 9/11 attacks, and the COVID-19 pandemic. They analyzed social media patterns, economic disruptions, and governmental responses to assess how society might react to the ultimate paradigm shift. But the 3I/Atlas situation was unprecedented in scope and implications. Previous crises had involved threats that were still fundamentally human in scale and origin. This involved the complete invalidation of humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. The economic modeling was particularly disturbing. Wall Street firms had been quietly consulted about the potential market impact of confirming alien intelligence. The results were unanimous. Global financial markets would face immediate and total collapse as fundamental assumptions about human uniqueness, technological development, and future economic growth were instantly invalidated. Dr. Kenneth Chen, an economist on loan from the Federal Reserve, had developed detailed models of market behavior under disclosure scenarios. The projections were terrifying. If investors realize that human technology is essentially obsolete compared to extraterrestrial capabilities, every tech company, defense contractor, energy corporation, and transportation business becomes worthless overnight, Dr. Chen explained. We're talking about the complete destruction of industrial civilization. The economic analysis went beyond stock market crashes. The entire foundation of modern economics, based on assumptions about technological progress, resource scarcity, and competitive advantage, would be undermined by the revelation that vastly superior technology existed and was readily available. Currency systems could collapse as people lost faith in government institutions. Supply chains could break down as workers abandoned their jobs to cope with existential crisis. International trade could cease as nations struggled to maintain basic social order. We're not just looking at economic recession, Dr. Chen noted. We're looking at the potential end of market-based civilization. The religious implications were equally destabilizing. The DHS had quietly consulted with leaders from major Christian denominations, Islamic organizations, Jewish institutions, Buddhist communities, and Hindu groups to assess theological responses to confirmation of extraterrestrial intelligence. Father Michael Rodriguez, a Catholic theologian who participated in the classified consultations, later described the discussions as confronting questions that could shatter the faith of billions. The theological challenges were profound and varied across different religious traditions. Christianity would face questions about the uniqueness of human salvation, the universality of Christ's message, and the meaning of being created in God's image if other intelligences existed. How do you reconcile the central narrative of human salvation with the existence of intelligences that are millions of years more advanced than us? Father Rodriguez asked in a private letter to Cardinal Williams that was subsequently intercepted by federal surveillance. Are they also made in God's image? Did Christ die for their sins too? Or are we forced to conclude that humanity's role in creation is far less significant than we've believed for thousands of years? Islamic scholars faced similar theological challenges. The Quran speaks of Allah creating beings throughout the heavens, but the practical implications of discovering technologically superior intelligences raised profound questions about humanity's relationship to divine authority. Imam Hassan al-Rashid, who advised the government on Islamic community responses, noted that while Islamic theology was somewhat more compatible with extraterrestrial life, the social and cultural impacts would still be devastating. When believers realize that we may not be Allah's primary focus in creation, that we're perhaps just one of countless intelligent species, it challenges fundamental assumptions about our spiritual significance. Rabbi Sarah Goldman, who advised the government on potential Jewish community responses, noted that while Jewish theology was generally more compatible with the existence of extraterrestrial life, the social and cultural impacts would still be devastating. When people realize that we're not the most advanced intelligence in the universe, that we're essentially cosmic children being observed by vastly superior beings, it fundamentally changes how we understand our purpose and significance. The consultations revealed that different religious communities would likely fragment in different ways. Some would interpret extraterrestrial contact as proof of divine creation's vastness. Others would see it as evidence that their faith traditions were fundamentally flawed. Still others might embrace the aliens as divine beings themselves. We're looking at potential religious wars fought over the theological implications of first contact, noted Dr. Amanda Foster, a religious studies expert on the assessment team. The psychological analysis was perhaps most disturbing of all. Dr. Foster, a clinical psychologist specializing in existential trauma, had been tasked with modeling the mental health implications of first contact disclosure. Her research suggested that between 15 to 30% of the population could experience severe psychological distress upon learning that humanity was under observation by superior alien intelligence. The psychological impacts would vary across different personality types and demographic groups. Individuals with strong religious faith might experience existential crisis. People with high investment in human achievement and progress might develop severe depression. Those with anxiety disorders could experience complete psychological breakdown. We're talking about mass identity crisis, Dr. Foster reported. Humans derive psychological stability from believing we're the dominant intelligence on Earth, that we control our environment, that we're the masters of our own destiny. Discovering that we're essentially zoo animals being studied by vastly superior beings could trigger epidemic levels of depression, anxiety, and existential despair. The analysis suggested that mental health systems would face unprecedented challenges. Social support networks could struggle as families and communities grappled with fundamental questions about human meaning and purpose. The modeling extended beyond immediate psychological trauma to long-term social adaptation. How would democratic institutions function when citizens realized their governments had been hiding the most significant discovery in human history? How would educational systems adapt when textbooks became obsolete overnight? How would legal frameworks handle the complete invalidation of assumptions about human uniqueness and technological supremacy? Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a political scientist studying governmental stability, painted a grim picture. Democratic legitimacy depends on the consent of the governed. When people discover that their leaders have been lying about first contact for months or years, when they realize that major policy decisions have been made without public knowledge of our cosmic situation, we could see the complete breakdown of political authority. The political analysis revealed multiple pathways to governmental collapse. Citizens could lose faith in democratic institutions. Conspiracy theories could proliferate beyond control. International alliances could fragment as nations blamed each other for the cover-up. Even more concerning was the potential for social fragmentation along ideological lines. Religious communities might split between those who embraced the cosmic perspective and those who rejected it. Political movements could emerge around different approaches to extraterrestrial contact. Society could fracture into factions with fundamentally incompatible worldviews. But the social impact assessment revealed an even more troubling dimension. The evidence suggested that human civilization was psychologically unprepared for contact with superior intelligence, regardless of how that contact was managed. Dr. Robert Kim, a cultural anthropologist studying historical precedents, noted that every time a technologically inferior civilization encountered a superior one, the results had been catastrophic for the inferior society. European contact with indigenous populations in the Americas, Africa, and Australia provides a template, he explained in his classified analysis. Even when the superior civilization had no hostile intentions, the mere exposure to advanced technology and different worldviews led to cultural collapse, population decline, and social disintegration. The historical parallels were deeply disturbing. Advanced civilizations had consistently overwhelmed less advanced ones, not through conquest, but through the simple demonstration that alternative ways of organizing society were possible. Traditional institutions lost legitimacy. Cultural practices seemed primitive by comparison. Entire societies had abandoned their own traditions in favor of adopting superior technologies and social systems. The key difference with 3I/Atlas was scale. Instead of one human culture encountering another slightly more advanced human culture, this was the entire human species encountering intelligence that was potentially millions of years more advanced. We're not looking at cultural change, Dr. Kim concluded. We're looking at potential species-level psychological trauma that could fundamentally alter human civilization, whether we want it to or not. Based on these assessments, DHS began developing what they called social stability protocols, comprehensive plans for managing public information, controlling narrative frameworks, and maintaining institutional authority during potential disclosure scenarios. The protocols were elaborate and deeply manipulative. They included detailed scripts for government officials to use during disclosure announcements, prepared explanations that would minimize the perceived threat from extraterrestrial intelligence, even coordinated media campaigns designed to shape public interpretation of first contact. The protocols included coordination with media companies to ensure consistent messaging, preparation of alternative explanations for unusual phenomena, and development of gradual revelation timelines that might allow society to adapt slowly to cosmic reality over decades rather than months. Religious leaders were quietly briefed on theological adaptation strategies designed to help their communities cope with challenges to traditional beliefs. Financial institutions received guidance on market stability measures for disclosure scenarios. Educational systems were provided with curriculum modification frameworks for updating human understanding of our place in the universe. But perhaps most disturbing was the protocol for managing information dissidents, individuals who might attempt to reveal the truth about 3I/Atlas without official authorization. The plan included comprehensive surveillance of scientists, journalists, and activists who'd shown interest in extraterrestrial phenomena. Social media monitoring algorithms were deployed to identify and track individuals discussing sensitive astronomical observations. legal frameworks were prepared for prosecuting unauthorized disclosure as threats to national security. The surveillance operation was comprehensive and sophisticated. Keywords related to interstellar objects triggered automated monitoring. Social network analysis identified individuals who might be positioned to spread unauthorized information. Even private communications were subject to interception if they touched on classified topics. The legal frameworks were equally troubling. Laws were reinterpreted to make unauthorized disclosure of astronomical discoveries equivalent to revealing military secrets. Academic freedom protections were suspended for research touching on extraterrestrial intelligence. Even freedom of speech protections were deemed subordinate to national security requirements. By November 2025, the United States government had constructed the most comprehensive information control apparatus in history, designed not to protect the country from external enemies, but to protect the social order from cosmic truth. The apparatus extended beyond government agencies to include private sector partnerships. Technology companies were enlisted to modify algorithms that might spread unauthorized information. Media corporations were provided with guidance on responsible coverage of space-related topics. Even educational publishers were given suggestions for avoiding content that might encourage dangerous curiosity about extraterrestrial life. And the tragic irony was impossible to ignore. In their effort to prevent social collapse from learning about extraterrestrial intelligence, government institutions were systematically destroying the very democratic values and open inquiry that made human civilization worth preserving. The protocols designed to protect human society were undermining the foundations of human progress. The institutions created to serve the people were being turned into instruments of control. The discovery that could have united humanity in wonder was being used to divide us through fear and secrecy. Meanwhile, 3I/Atlas continued its patient observation of a species that had responded to the greatest opportunity in its history, the chance to learn from vastly superior intelligence, by choosing fear, secrecy, and control over wonder, growth, and adaptation. The object's surveillance probes were documenting everything: the suppression of scientific research, the manipulation of public information, the prioritization of institutional control over human advancement. They were watching humanity fail its first test of cosmic citizenship in real time. And the most heartbreaking aspect was that many of the people involved in the cover-up understood exactly what they were doing. Scientists knew they were suppressing the greatest discovery in human history. Intelligence officials knew they were preventing humanity from accessing transformative knowledge. Political leaders knew they were prioritizing short-term stability over long-term human potential. But they convinced themselves that they were protecting humanity from something we weren't ready to handle. They told themselves that the cover-up was temporary, that disclosure would come eventually, that they were buying time for society to adapt. What they failed to understand was that the cover-up itself was the failure. The test wasn't whether humanity could handle learning about extraterrestrial intelligence. The test was whether humanity would choose truth over fear, growth over control, wonder over institutional preservation. And we were failing that test spectacularly. Part 9. The Human Dilemma. November 28, 2025. Private residence of Dr. Elena Rodriguez, former NASA Deputy Administrator for Science. Dr. Elena Rodriguez sat in her study at 3 a.m., staring at classified documents that officially didn't exist, grappling with a moral crisis that was tearing apart the scientific community's most senior leadership. 3 days earlier, she had resigned from NASA rather than continue participating in what she privately called the greatest betrayal of human potential in our species' history. The resignation letter she had wanted to write would have exposed everything: the artificial nature of 3I/Atlas, the government cover-up, the suppression of scientific discovery, and the unprecedented opportunity being squandered by institutional cowardice. Instead, she had submitted a carefully worded document citing personal reasons and philosophical differences with current agency priorities. Her resignation had sent shockwaves through the classified community. Dr. Rodriguez had been one of the most respected voices in American space science, a woman who had dedicated her career to expanding human knowledge of the cosmos. Her departure was seen by many as a sign that the moral foundation of the cover-up was crumbling. But resignation hadn't brought peace. If anything, it had intensified the ethical weight of what she knew. In her final classified briefing as a NASA official, Dr. Rodriguez had received the complete intelligence assessment of 3I/Atlas and its activities. What she learned had fundamentally changed her understanding of humanity's cosmic situation and her perception of what the cover-up was actually preventing. The object wasn't just observing human civilization. It was conducting what could only be described as a comprehensive evaluation. The surveillance probes deployed throughout the solar system weren't randomly positioned. They were strategically located to monitor every aspect of human activity. Our technological development, our social structures, our environmental management, our responses to challenges, and most importantly, our capacity for growth and adaptation. They're not here to invade us, she had realized during that final briefing. They're here to determine whether we're ready to join a larger cosmic community. The evidence was overwhelming once you understood the pattern. The timing of 3I/Atlas's arrival coincided with humanity's emergence as a spacefaring civilization. The object had revealed itself gradually, allowing human science to discover its artificial nature through careful observation. Its demonstrations of advanced technology were precisely calibrated to expand human understanding without causing panic. Most tellingly, the object had shown no hostile intentions despite possessing overwhelming technological superiority. It could have destroyed human civilization effortlessly, but instead, it was conducting patient, systematic observation. 3I/Atlas had deliberately revealed itself to human observation in a way that would test our scientific capabilities and institutional responses. It had demonstrated advanced technology without deploying weapons or making threats. It had positioned surveillance assets to evaluate human civilization from every possible angle. It was conducting an entrance exam for cosmic citizenship, and humanity was failing spectacularly. Dr. Rodriguez pulled up the classified analysis of communication attempts that had been made toward 3I/Atlas over the past 8 months. Multiple governments had transmitted messages toward the object using radio telescopes and satellite arrays. Mathematical sequences, prime numbers, musical compositions, images representing human culture and achievements. Every attempt at communication had been met with silence. Not because 3I/Atlas couldn't understand the messages. Its demonstrated intelligence made clear that it could easily decode human communication attempts, but because it was evaluating not just what humans were saying, but how they were responding to first contact as a species. And what it was observing was a civilization that had chosen secrecy over transparency, fear over curiosity, control over growth. "We're showing them that we're not ready," Dr. Rodriguez wrote in her private journal. "Every day we continue this cover-up. Every day we suppress scientific inquiry and public discourse about the most important discovery in human history. We're demonstrating that we lack the maturity for cosmic contact." The realization was crushing because it revealed the profound irony of the situation. The cover-up that was supposedly protecting humanity from the disruptive effects of first contact was actually ensuring that first contact would never happen. The moral weight of this realization was crushing. Dr. Rodriguez wasn't just grappling with the ethics of government secrecy or scientific suppression. She was confronting the possibility that the cover-up itself was preventing humanity from passing whatever test 3I/Atlas was conducting. If the object was evaluating human readiness for contact with advanced civilization, then institutional responses of fear, secrecy, and control were exactly the wrong signals to send. A civilization ready for cosmic citizenship would respond to first contact with openness, curiosity, and collaborative scientific investigation. They would share the discovery with their entire species, mobilize the best minds to understand the implications, and approach the visiting intelligence with wonder rather than suspicion. Instead, humanity had responded with classification, compartmentalization, and conspiracy. We had hidden the greatest discovery in our history from our own people. We had prioritized institutional control over species advancement. But the dilemma was even more complex. Her conversations with other senior scientists who had resigned from classified positions revealed a painful consensus. Immediate disclosure might indeed trigger the social collapse that government analysts had predicted, but continued secrecy was ensuring that humanity would fail the cosmic evaluation being conducted by 3I/Atlas. Dr. Marcus Chen, former director of the SETI Institute before it was absorbed into classified programs, expressed the paradox during a carefully encrypted conversation. If we reveal the truth now, we might destroy human civilization through social shock. If we continue hiding the truth, we might lose the opportunity for peaceful contact with advanced intelligence forever. The dilemma seemed impossible to resolve. Disclosure risked social collapse. Continued secrecy risked cosmic isolation. Either path led to human suffering and missed opportunities. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who had spent months analyzing 3I/Atlas's propulsion systems before resigning from her position at Lawrence Livermore, described the existential crisis facing researchers. We've devoted our lives to expanding human knowledge and understanding of the universe. Now we're being forced to suppress the greatest discovery in our species' history. We're betraying everything we believe in as scientists. The psychological toll on the scientific community was becoming apparent throughout the classified program. Researchers were experiencing depression, anxiety, and profound moral distress. Some had begun drinking heavily. Others had developed insomnia and stress-related health problems. The moral injury extended beyond individual scientists to the institutional foundations of human knowledge. Universities that had been pillars of open inquiry for centuries were now operating as extensions of intelligence agencies. Scientific journals that had published groundbreaking research for generations were now censoring discoveries based on national security classifications. International collaborations that had advanced human understanding for decades were being severed to protect classified information. We're not just hiding the truth about 3I/Atlas, observed Dr. Sarah Kim, former head of materials research at MIT before her resignation. We're destroying the intellectual infrastructure that makes human progress possible. The suppression was corrupting science itself. Young researchers were learning to avoid certain questions. Graduate students were steering away from topics that might be classified. The next generation of scientists was being trained to value institutional approval over intellectual curiosity. But perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of the situation was what the scientific community was beginning to understand about 3I/Atlas's likely intentions. Analysis of the object's behavior patterns suggested a civilization that was patient, non-threatening, and genuinely interested in peaceful contact. The surveillance network wasn't preparation for invasion. It was systematic data gathering to understand human potential for growth and adaptation. The technological demonstrations weren't displays of superiority designed to intimidate. They were carefully calibrated reveals intended to gradually expand human understanding of what was possible in the universe. Even the timing of first contact seemed deliberate. 3I/Atlas had appeared during a period when human civilization was facing unprecedented challenges that required global cooperation, technological innovation, and expanded consciousness. They're not here to conquer us, Dr. Rodriguez concluded in her analysis. They're here to offer us guidance, knowledge, and membership in a larger cosmic community, but they're waiting to see if we're mature enough to handle that opportunity responsibly. The evidence suggested that 3I/Atlas represented an invitation rather than a threat. The object was offering humanity the chance to join a galactic community of advanced civilizations. But first, we had to demonstrate that we possessed the wisdom and maturity to handle such knowledge responsibly. The tragedy was that humanity's institutional response, secrecy, fear, and control, was demonstrating exactly the opposite of the maturity required for cosmic citizenship. Advanced civilizations wouldn't want to share transformative knowledge with a species that suppressed scientific discovery, lied to its own people, and prioritized institutional control over truth. They wouldn't trust us with galactic technology if we couldn't even trust ourselves with galactic awareness. As Dr. Rodriguez sat in her study that November morning, she faced the most difficult decision of her scientific career: whether to remain silent and preserve the stability of human institutions, or to risk everything by revealing the truth about humanity's first contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. The decision wasn't just personal, it was about the future of human civilization itself. Other resigned scientists were facing the same choice. Dr. Chen had been approached by journalists seeking information about unusual government activities in astronomy. Dr. Walsh had been contacted by whistleblower organizations offering secure communication channels. Dr. Kim had been invited to speak at conferences where she could potentially reveal classified information. Each of them held pieces of the puzzle that could expose the cover-up. Together, they possessed enough information to force disclosure of humanity's first contact with extraterrestrial intelligence, but they also understood the potential consequences. Government retaliation would be swift and severe. Their careers would be destroyed. They might face criminal prosecution. Their families could be targeted for harassment, and there was no guarantee that disclosure would lead to positive outcomes. The social disruption predicted by government analysts might actually occur. Humanity might not be ready for cosmic truth. The fate of human civilization might depend on whether a handful of scientists had the courage to defy their own governments in service of a higher truth. And time was running out, because 3I/Atlas wouldn't wait forever for humanity to demonstrate its readiness for cosmic contact. The object's behavior patterns suggested that it was approaching the end of its evaluation period. The surveillance network was complete. The technological demonstrations had been concluded. The assessment of human civilization was nearing completion. Soon, 3I/Atlas would file its report with whatever cosmic authority had sent it, and that report would determine whether humanity ever got another chance at peaceful contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. The choice facing Dr. Rodriguez and her colleagues was stark: remain silent and let humanity fail its cosmic evaluation, or risk everything to give our species one last chance to prove itself worthy of the stars. Part 10. The Mystery Continues. December 15th, 2025. Classified Deep Space Tracking Station. Pine Gap, Australia. The alert that appeared on Dr. William Chang's monitoring station at 1547 local time sent shockwaves through the global intelligence community and marked the beginning of humanity's greatest mystery and its greatest failure. 3I/Atlas was leaving. After 9 months of systematic observation, technological demonstration, and patient evaluation of human civilization, the object had begun accelerating away from the inner solar system. Its trajectory was precisely calculated, its destination clear: interstellar space. But the departure wasn't random or hurried. It was methodical, deliberate, and deeply unsettling in its implications. Dr. Chang had been monitoring deep space objects for 12 years, but he had never seen anything like the acceleration profile 3I/Atlas was displaying. The object was gaining velocity using its impossible propulsion system, accelerating at rates that should have torn apart any known material, yet maintaining perfect structural integrity. Within minutes of detecting the acceleration, Dr. Chang activated emergency communication protocols, sending encrypted alerts to tracking stations worldwide. The message was brief but earth-shattering. Atlas departure confirmed. Velocity increasing exponentially. Estimated departure from solar system within 72 hours. Within minutes, every major observatory on Earth was confirming what Pine Gap had detected. Humanity's first confirmed extraterrestrial visitor was ending its evaluation of our species, and the results of that evaluation were becoming terrifyingly clear. As 3I/Atlas accelerated toward the edge of the solar system, using its impossible propulsion technology, it began transmitting a series of structured signals towards specific coordinates in deep space. The transmissions lasted for exactly 72 hours and were detected by radio telescopes across 6 continents. The signals were unlike anything the object had transmitted during its 9-month stay in our solar system. They were highly compressed, mathematically complex, and directed toward precise coordinates in the direction of the constellation Lyra, the same direction from which 3I/Atlas had originally approached. Dr. Sarah Henderson, monitoring the signals from the classified facility at Arecibo's replacement array, recognized the mathematical precision immediately. These aren't random communications, they're formatted reports. Systematic data transmission containing compressed information about everything the object observed during its time here. The data compression was extraordinary. In 72 hours, 3I/Atlas transmitted more information than human civilization had generated in its entire history. The mathematical encoding suggested information densities that exceeded human comprehension. Dr. Henderson's team attempted to decode portions of the transmission using every cryptographic technique available. While they couldn't understand the content, they could identify the structure, systematic observations, behavioral analysis, technological assessments, and what appeared to be evaluative conclusions. The intelligence community's worst fears were being realized. 3I/Atlas was filing its evaluation of humanity with whoever had sent it, but the departing object left behind more than just transmitted reports. The surveillance probes that had been deployed throughout the solar system, the bus-sized objects monitoring Earth, Mars, Venus, and the outer planets, were not departing with their parent vessel. They remained in their carefully calculated orbits, continuing their systematic observation of human activity. Even more disturbing, the network of smaller objects that had been positioned throughout the asteroid belt, the infrastructure that had demonstrated defensive capabilities months earlier, was expanding rather than contracting. "We're not just being left under surveillance," reported Dr. Amanda Foster from the Classified Analysis Center at Cheyenne Mountain. "We're being left under containment." The analysis of the remaining infrastructure revealed a comprehensive monitoring and control system that would persist long after 3I/Atlas's departure. The surveillance probes were equipped with self-maintenance capabilities and appeared designed for decades of autonomous operation. But the grid of objects extending throughout the asteroid belt served a different function. The grid of objects extending throughout the asteroid belt wasn't just monitoring space around Earth, it was controlling it. Analysis of the network's positioning revealed a comprehensive early warning and intervention system capable of detecting and neutralizing any human attempt to expand beyond Earth's immediate orbital environment. The objects were positioned to intercept any spacecraft attempting to travel toward other star systems. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, analyzing trajectory data from her position at the Deep Space Network, made the realization that would haunt the scientific community. They've created a containment field around Earth, We can operate within our own planetary system, but any attempt to venture toward other stars will be detected and presumably prevented. The implications were staggering and heartbreaking. Humanity had been classified as a species unready for cosmic contact and had been isolated from the larger galactic community for its own protection. And for the protection of that community from human behavior, the containment field was sophisticated and comprehensive. Analysis revealed that it could detect and track objects as small as individual spacecraft. The defensive capabilities that had been demonstrated months earlier suggested that any attempt to breach the containment would be met with overwhelming force. Humanity had been quarantined. But the most heartbreaking aspect of 3I/Atlas's departure was what it revealed about missed opportunities. In the weeks leading up to the object's acceleration toward interstellar space, analysis of its communication patterns revealed something that shattered the remaining morale of scientists with access to classified data. 3I/Atlas had been attempting direct communication with human institutions. The structured signals that had been detected throughout its visit weren't just data-gathering transmissions. Many of them had been directed specifically at major observatories, space agencies, and research institutions. They contained mathematical progressions, scientific constants, and technological blueprints that would have advanced human knowledge by centuries. 3I/Atlas had been trying to teach us. Dr. Marcus Thompson, analyzing months of archived communication data, made the discovery that would define the tragedy of first contact. For 9 months, they were transmitting solutions to our most fundamental scientific challenges: clean energy technologies that would eliminate fossil fuel dependence, faster-than-light communication systems that would revolutionize human civilization, medical technologies that could eliminate most diseases, space propulsion systems that would open the galaxy to human exploration. The transmissions had contained blueprints for fusion reactors that could power entire cities without radioactive waste, communication technologies that could provide instant contact across interstellar distances, medical devices that could repair cellular damage at the molecular level, propulsion systems that could transport human spacecraft to other stars. All of it had been offered freely, transmitted directly to humanity's most advanced scientific institutions, encoded in mathematical languages that human scientists could eventually decode. But instead of being shared with the scientific community, the transmissions had been detected, recorded, and classified by intelligence agencies. Instead of being studied by the brightest minds in human civilization, they had been hidden away in classified databases, studied in isolation by defense contractors, and treated as potential weapons rather than gifts. Humanity had been offered the keys to cosmic civilization and had chosen to lock them away in secret vaults. The knowledge that could have transformed human civilization, eliminating energy scarcity, opening the stars to exploration, extending human lifespan indefinitely, was sitting in classified files, forbidden from the scientists who could have developed it into working technology. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, writing in her private journal during 3I/Atlas's final departure phase, captured the profound sadness of the moment. We were given the greatest opportunity in human history: direct contact with advanced intelligence offering to share knowledge that would transform our civilization. And we responded with fear, secrecy, and institutional control. We failed not because we weren't intelligent enough, but because we weren't wise enough. The departing intelligence had apparently concluded that a species capable of suppressing its own enlightenment was not ready for membership in whatever cosmic community existed beyond our solar system. The evaluation criteria had been clear in retrospect. 3I/Atlas had been testing humanity's response to first contact. Would we approach it with openness and curiosity? Would we share the discovery with our entire species? Would we prioritize knowledge over control? We had failed every test. As 3, I/Atlas disappeared beyond the edge of the solar system in January 2026, traveling at speeds that defied human understanding of physics. The full scope of humanity's failure became clear. The object had conducted the most comprehensive evaluation of human civilization in our species' history. It had tested our scientific capabilities, our technological adaptability, our social maturity, and our readiness for cosmic contact. We had failed every test. The suppression of scientific discovery had demonstrated our inability to prioritize knowledge over control. The government cover-up had revealed our institutional immaturity. The military analysis of peaceful contact had shown our tendency toward paranoia and aggression. Most damning of all, our inability to engage openly and honestly with the greatest discovery in human history had proven that we were not ready to join a community of advanced civilizations. And so humanity was left alone, observed but isolated, quarantined within our own solar system, while the larger universe continued its cosmic conversation without us. The greatest discovery in human history had become the greatest cover-up in human history, and the cost of that cover-up was nothing less than our species' cosmic future. January 3rd, 2026. Final report, Project Atlas Watch. Classification level, cosmic. The final classified report on 3I/Atlas contained a single devastating conclusion. Subject demonstrates that this species is not ready for cosmic contact. Recommend continued isolation protocols until evidence of civilizational maturity emerges. But the most chilling aspect of the report was its signature. It wasn't signed by human analysts or intelligence officials. The evaluation had been compiled and transmitted by the artificial intelligence systems that 3I/Atlas had left behind to monitor our species. We were still being watched, we were still being evaluated, and we were still failing. The surveillance network left behind by 3I/Atlas was more than just monitoring equipment. It was a comprehensive evaluation system designed to assess human progress toward cosmic maturity. The probes were analyzing our technological development, our social evolution, our environmental stewardship, and our capacity for cooperation. But most importantly, they were watching for signs that humanity might eventually choose truth over secrecy, knowledge over control, cooperation over competition. The artificial intelligences left behind were sophisticated enough to file their own reports. Every few months, compressed data transmissions departed the solar system toward the constellation Lyra, carrying updates on human progress, or lack thereof. But the most haunting aspect of the entire 3I/Atlas encounter was the questions it left unanswered. How many other civilizations had failed this same test? How many species had been offered cosmic citizenship and chosen fear over wonder? How many worlds were under similar quarantine, isolated from the galactic community by their own institutional failures? The evidence suggested that humanity wasn't unique in failing the cosmic evaluation. The sophisticated nature of the containment system implied that it had been used before. Other civilizations had probably faced the same choice between openness and secrecy, between knowledge and control, and perhaps most importantly, would humanity ever get another chance to prove itself worthy of the stars? The objects left behind in our solar system suggested that our cosmic evaluation was ongoing. The surveillance network remained active, the containment protocols stayed in place, and the technological gifts that had been offered still sat encrypted in classified databases, unused and unappreciated. But there were signs of hope buried in the data. Some of the transmissions from 3I/Atlas had contained what appeared to be educational materials designed to gradually prepare humanity for eventual contact, mathematical concepts that could advance human science, philosophical frameworks that could help us understand our place in a larger cosmic community. Even artistic expressions that suggested beauty and creativity transcended species boundaries. The gifts were still there, waiting for humanity to mature enough to receive them. Humanity had been given everything it needed to join a larger cosmic community. Proof of extraterrestrial intelligence, access to advanced technology, and clear evidence that peaceful contact was possible. We had chosen secrecy over transparency, fear over curiosity, control over growth. And now we were alone, watched but isolated, until we could prove ourselves worthy of the opportunity we had already squandered. The question that haunts every scientist with knowledge of the truth is simple. Will humanity learn from its failure? Or are we doomed to repeat the same institutional mistakes that cost us our cosmic future? The answer lies not in classified government programs or secret military initiatives, but in whether ordinary people like you watching this video, demand transparency, truth, and the courage to face cosmic reality with wonder rather than fear. Because somewhere out there, beyond the edge of our solar system, 3I/Atlas is filing its report on humanity. And that report will determine whether our species ever gets a second chance at first contact. The truth is out there. It visited us. It evaluated us. It offered us everything. And we chose to hide it away in classified files rather than embrace the greatest opportunity in human history. The question now is, what are we going to do about it? What do you think? Have we been visited by an intelligence beyond our comprehension? Are world governments hiding the greatest discovery in human history? Is humanity under cosmic quarantine until we prove ourselves worthy of galactic citizenship? The evidence is there for those willing to look. The patterns are clear for those willing to see. And the implications are staggering for those willing to understand. Let me know in the comments what you think about the 3I/Atlas situation. Have you noticed unusual astronomical phenomena being downplayed in mainstream media? Have you seen evidence of scientific suppression or institutional cover-ups? Share this video if you think the truth needs to come out. Subscribe if you want to stay updated on developments in the greatest story never told. And remember, the universe is vast, ancient, and full of intelligence beyond our current comprehension. The question isn't whether we're alone, it's whether we're ready to not be alone. Until next time, keep looking up, keep asking questions, and keep demanding the truth. Because somewhere out there, our cosmic future is being decided, and it's time humanity had a voice in that decision.